this time.
As you just heard, the meeting is being recorded. I want to thank Caesar, the public information officer for San Diego City College, and our intern, young Amir Duke, a Morehouse man. They are the great support behind these webinars that are part of a series of webinars for advisors, for students that are attending the ninth annual Minicolor Student Leadership Institute. Today's subject is something that both Herb and I have presented all over the country on. We are passionate about this subject of career pathways. This is open to anyone, even though you have two brothers presenting. We haven't forgot our sisters and anyone else who may be on the line. This is an honest conversation about career pathways. Buckle up. This is not going to be your normal presentation. We have a PowerPoint that we're going to try to get through, but the most important thing are your questions. So you'll see the chat there. If you have questions, pump them in the chat. Young Amir and Caesar will notify us. We're not held to the PowerPoint. What we really want to do is have a real conversation. Both Herb and I have been hiring managers for over 20 years. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to people's preparation, their dress, their knowledge, and shoot, what, over 10 years ago now, Herb and I got together and we wanted to put together a presentation to help people. Now, in full transparency, you're going to see Herb and I have worked a lot of places. Now, Herb now officially has beat me in the number of places that he's worked at. But
I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going nowhere. I promise.
We have spent a lot of time trying to master the interview process, and we put this presentation together with that in mind. So let's just dive right into it. But the most important part of this presentation really are your questions. So if you have questions, dump them in the chat. This is your opportunity to ask all the questions you ever wanted to know. And I know we're not the only ones that wanted to know something when we walked into an interview panel and everybody was white. Or we walked into an interview and people didn't make any facial expressions. This is the opportunity to ask those questions. Are people making judgment based on how I'm dressed or how I'm speaking, or my name being an African name, or women want to know about braids, and brothers want to know about wearing that lime green suit that they got for Easter. This is the place to ask those questions.
Don't wear the lime green. Do not
Herb
wear
and
the
I
lime.
will play off of each other. So let's just dive right into it. Let me share the PowerPoint. And I hope everyone can see the PowerPoint. Herb, are we good? You can see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Good. So we've already, let's formally introduce ourselves. My name is Ricky Shabazz. I'm the president of San Diego City College. Big Herb.
Herb English, Vice President, Student Services, Barstow Community College.
Now, we're both coming to you from Cali, but don't hate on the West Coast, which is the best coast. This presentation is universal to anywhere. Herb and I have done this presentation all over the country. Some of it is going to reference California, but don't tune in on that piece of it. Tune in on the information. This is about career pathways. Herb, you want to go over the agenda?
Yeah. And also I wanted to say, Ricky did a reference that we're coming from California, and we both are born and raised in California, but I've also worked on the East Coast. I've worked in Maryland. And to be honest with you, I've seen some of the same things that I dealt with on the West Coast, on the East Coast. So some of our higher education institutions have some of the same similarities and things of that nature. So obviously the ground rules, me and Ricky are going to answer every question or any question as honest as we can. All we ask is that, we keep everything here that's said here. It's like Las Vegas. Me and Ricky don't want to, go somewhere and somebody say, yeah, they said, you said, come on. We need y'all to focus And we need y'all, like I said, anything you ask will be answered very honestly. We have some learning objectives that we'll go over. Obviously, we'll talk about who we are, just so you can understand that me and Ricky are not, these outliers. We started as some of you started, as classified professionals, as entry level positions, and we worked our way up. And we've been faculty at different institutions as well. Why work at a community college? Understanding organizational culture is very important. And that plays off of why you should have a network of people, because you will not be able to learn every culture without having a network in different places. From application to interview, the job search, we'll go over that. Networking and professional organizations, the research of men of color and advisors. And then, like I said, we'll have some chat. Now, we only have about a good hour, and we want to make sure. So some of these slides we'll probably skip over because we probably, maybe we'll touch on some things. But without further ado, I'll go for this one too. Our ground rules for the day is we're actually speaking as researchers and practitioners. We've been working in higher ed. Me and Ricky have worked at the 4-year, and we worked at community college. This is intended strictly to help. I know some of you may have went on an interview pre-COVID, and maybe even some of you have been on interviews after COVID, and it's very different, virtual interviews from a face-to-face interview, but how you prepare to me is the same. You have to prepare. The answer to every question, this is funny. Me and Ricky were doing this presentation, and a lot of our responses were, it depends, right? It's nothing's going to be an exact science. Nothing is going to be mathematics. It's all about the situation, and it depends. Fairness has no place in a flawed system. If you think that you're going to go into an interview and you're going to ace it, and they're going to pick you because you aced it, then you're in the wrong system. A lot of it is by chance. A lot of it is by prayer. A lot of it is about how you look sometimes. And I mean, your race and ethnicity or gender may play a big role in why you get a position. Interviewing is an art, science, and a skill. You need to practice. I know it's difficult to have your friend ask you a question and you answer it because it doesn't feel organic, but that is a way that you prepare, or have a coworker or have one of your supervisors. And be honest. I think the key for everyone is we all got to look at ourselves in the mirror before and after an interview. And you really got to ask yourself, how do you do? You have to be honest when assessing your skills. And it's okay to come short, but every situation is a learning opportunity. So I hate if that was quick, but I want to make sure we get to the meat of our presentation. So anything that I may have missed or you have a question about, please drop it in the chat, and Amir and Caesar will help us as we move along.
Yeah, and I would just add the piece that is most important for me is this notion of fairness, that if you are somebody who's going to spend a lot of time talking about what's not fair, you're not going to like this presentation. Because Herb and I really talk about mastery. How do you control the variables that you can, and the ones you can't, you don't worry about. And we a lot of what we're going to talk about really is mastery of this interview process, and the fact that if you run up against a Herb or a Ricky, we're gonna outwork you. We're gonna out research you. We're gonna go to the college. We're gonna take every step to control the variables that we can control. And that's so if you're talking about fairness, you're gonna have a rough presentation today. Let's move to the next slide. You want to go ahead and take this one too, Herb?
For sure. Our learning objectives, we're going to be going over the hiring process, because I think that's a big piece. Is why am I not getting an interview? Where does my application go after I submit it? And then what's the process of getting an interview, et cetera, et cetera. We want to talk about that. Is it fair? We're going to talk about that, but I want everyone to really play in their minds that we are working in a system that was not built for people of color to some degree. And we'll dig a little deeper, but like I said, just really think about that, and think about your own campuses. Think about your own experience of sitting on an interview committee and just play that back in your head of who was on that committee and how did you feel when you saw other people of color that were candidates. How good is your preparation and your product, which is very important. Your resume, your cover letters, your interview questions. Are you really ready? You know, sometimes we read job descriptions and we think that we're going to be perfect for that job description. But you have to really start assessing what you've done, what you plan on doing, your education, etc., and how that's going to prepare you. Professional development is key. It's key, key, key. And I'm not, even if you have to fund your own professional development, it may come down to that. So, mentoring. I mentor a few folks. I've been mentored, and mentoring is a two-way street. So, we want to make sure that we include that in our development. Getting involved in professional of organizations like NASPA or ACA. I know NASPA is national. ACA is a more of a California-based, but you got to make sure that you're involved regionally or in your state or your surrounding area with professional organizations. And what I mean by that is not only educational, but maybe also community organizations like, community boards, Kiwanis, what's the other one? I'm sorry, but Kiwanis, Boys and Girls Clubs, things of that nature. Professional outlook and dress, and just a smidgen. You should be acting like your next position.
That's right.
If that makes sense. So if deans dress and act a certain way and you're a director or a manager or a coordinator, then you should be acting like that when you're in that role, because the people that are going to be maybe looking at you for future opportunities, they want to be able to say, you know what, that person is going to be a dean or a VP or even a president. Mastery. How bad do you want it? Are you going to walk into the job and you haven't done any research on the institution? Are you going to walk into the job and you haven't viewed their website? Are you going to walk into the job and you haven't even looked at their board of board minutes or their board agendas? And what are you reading? What kind of leadership books are you reading? What kind of in our state, our chancellor's office of our state system puts out weekly and quarterly newsletters and things of that nature to keep us updated. Are you reading those things so you can go into the room and be the most informed? And then the last but not least, the next steps.
Yeah, and these are what our learning objectives for this presentation are. Ron, I saw your hand. If any of the attendees, participants have a question, drop your question in the chat. The bottom of your screen should be the chat feature. Click on that, drop your question in there. If Herb and I are monitoring the chat, as well as Caesar and Amir, they'll let us know that there's a question. So Ron, I saw your hand. If you got a question, drop it in the chat. But these are our learning objectives. Real quick, little background about me. Again, I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president of San Diego City College, where I've been the president for going into my 4th academic year. To put that in perspective, the average president in California is about 2.5 years. I started my career at the University of California, Davis, where I was the assistant director of admissions. So I went straight from being a college student to an administrator, frankly. My background is in enrollment management. I help colleges grow, I manage enrollment, that sort of thing. Did take a stint as a vice president, college counselor at a charter high school. Realized I love working with high school students, but not every day. Went back to Harvey Mudd, ran into a culture that I didn't like, worked there for about 6 months as a small liberal arts science school. Then got a call from one of my colleagues and mentors, Dr. Keith Curry, the now president of Compton Community College. At the time, he was the dean of students. My mentors thought I was crazy for going to work at a community college that had lost its accreditation. That wound up being the best decision of my professional life. It was ghetto as all outdoors, but it was a family, and we helped grow the college from 3,000 students to over 15,000 without an accreditation in the middle of some of the largest community colleges in the country. that propelled me to be a vice president of students, where I got it handled to me my first year as a vice president. I tried to implement all the things I did at Compton, and they didn't want to hear nothing about that. So we'll talk about organizational culture a little bit later. I ran into a culture that was not supportive, that was anti-administration, and I had to learn how to navigate that. And I learned by reading some books and working with my mentors. After my, I would say after my second year at Valley, we started to do much better. I started to listen to people versus talking. I started to get to know them. All the things we know work, taking people out to lunch and dinner. And this magical thing happened. My career started to propel again. But my first year as a vice president, I got it handed to me. And really, it was thanks to Herb and others that talked me off the cliff from cutting my wrist, because I didn't understand, why did people just don't like me. I went through 2 president training programs. One is Lincoln. We're going to talk about those later. We talked about professional development. We're going to highlight some across the country. Lincoln is a president's training program for Black folks across the country. Has the highest placement of college presidents of any organization in the country. And this magical thing happened. I became the president of San Diego City College. The first time I applied for the presidency, didn't want to be a president. Was very fortunate to have a mentor, Dr. Irving out of Minnesota, that pushed me to apply to be a president, kicked my butt, helped me with my resume, helped me with my interview. And the first shot out of the gate, I was able to get a presidency working for one of the best colleges in the country. And Rico, we're going to get to your question about mentors. It's a great question. Let me turn it over to Herb to give his background.
Yes, a great question, Rico. Very great question. As Ricky intimated, I've been at a couple places, but I've never left a bad taste in anyone's mouth. I've never burnt any bridges. Every institution that I've ever worked at, I still have colleagues and former supervisors that still work at those institutions. And in some cases, when I see them, they ask me to come back to help in different ways. As you can see, I'll start at the bottom. And the reason I'm gonna start at the bottom is because as Ricky moved right into education after his undergraduate degree, I took a different, I guess, journey. And I'll briefly just talk about that. I went directly into County Child Protective Services right out of undergrad. I worked at a group home all through undergrad, worked with foster youth. And I wanted to be a social worker. I thought that was going to be my career. And after about 4.5 years of just seeing abuse, neglect, always seeing some form of family dysfunction, I couldn't take it anymore. So I transitioned to the Boys and Girls Club, which was another eye-opening experience of just how poverty and family dysfunction affect youth. And that's what really pushed me to want to have a career in education, was those 2 experiences, because I saw how family circumstances affect how well a student will do. So my very first job in education, I was an academic advisor at my alma mater, Cal State San Bernardino. And I tried to do everything under the sun at that institution. And one day my supervisor took me to the side after about 9 months. And he said, Herb, you're involved in everything. People speak very highly of you. You're on a lot of committees. He was like, I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm not retiring anytime soon. And it looks like you want to take over the campus. And if I were you, I would start applying for different administrative positions, and I will help you with that. And I will write any recommendations that you need. So that was my first administrative job. I was the director of EOPS and care at San Bernardino Valley College, worked there for about 6 years. And really, to be honest with you, and I'm so glad me and Ricky are doing this career pathway, I got sick and tired of folks taking credit for stuff that I did. And I won't lie, I got a little arrogant. So I left. And when I say I left the state. Some of you are going to have to think about that as you start looking at different positions and where you want to be, because you may not get the shot in the state that you live in. So I took a job at a small liberal arts college in Maryland. Best decision that I made, because I was able to really put the skills that I thought I had to work in an environment that I wasn't comfortable in. But the same stuff was going on at that small liberal arts college that was going on at other institutions that I worked at. But had a great time. When you work at a small college, you do more than just your job title. So that was great. Really made some good connections that I still have to this day. After that, I went to Moore Park College in Ventura County as a coordinator of EOPS. Got my first shot as a dean at Victor Valley College. Worked there for about 5 years. And then I thought I was ready to make that jump to vice president. And if anybody wants to really get into how you do your research on a campus, I thought I did my research on a campus and didn't find out a lot of stuff that I should have known until I got to West Hills Community College. And I won't go too much deeper. I think you can read between the lines. But I'll just give you a, for instance, the district had a major budget shortfall. So when I got my job, I didn't learn about furlough days until I accepted the offer. Everyone at the within the district was taking 1 furlough day a month. That is now 3 furlough days a month at that district. So those are other things that you really got to make sure that you're aware of before you make a decision to leave an institution. And now I'm at Barstow. I got a job during COVID. I never stepped foot on the campus until I had the job. Every interview, every meeting, negotiation was done via Zoom. Great experience. I'm currently probably the only African-American male that's been a senior leader on this campus in its history. I got a great president. I got a great senior leadership team. I'm in the right place that I should be right now. And I will be here for a while, especially until I complete the doctorate. So I have some experience. I have some life experience, but I'm really blessed to be in the position that I have now. So, like I said, as you can see from me and Ricky's trajectory, having that 4-year at community college, I think, really helps us to be well-rounded and to be able to give some advice in both avenues.
Yeah, and let's dive in to the first question, because this is about the questions, folks. We have this PowerPoint, but we're not held to it. Ron, appreciate your question about, because there's so much that Herb and I can talk about, and we want to talk about the things that you want to know. And so the question about how to begin the search for mentors, I always say in my public speaking that I'm the product of mentoring and great teaching. I've always sought out professional development opportunities. So Herb talked about some of them. Herb and I both went through a program called the ACA mentor program. ACA stands for the Association of California Community College Administrators. They have a year-long mentoring program where they pair you up with a mentor. So both Herb and I know I can speak for us because we've done this presentation enough, we've had intentional mentors, but some of the best mentors are just observing people and saying, I don't think I would have done that way. And so the easiest way to get a mentor, I believe, is joining a professional organization in your field. So if you work in instruction, there are professional organizations for faculty, deans of instructions, vice president of instruction. If you work in student services, you heard Herb mention NASPA. I went through the NASPA training for new vice presidents. It saved my job because I read a book that I'm going to show you all later called Executive Transitions in Student Services. The second chapter of that book talked about the common mistakes that people made. I made all of those mistakes. I had to go back to my team and humble myself and frankly apologize to them and try to do a reset. So mentoring, Ron, happens. Is it Ron that would ask that question? Yes.
Rico.
No, excuse me, Rico. I apologize, Rico. Rico, mentoring happens both formally and informally. In terms of organizational culture, the best way to know about it, and I think Herb and I have both found this out the hard way, is asking people who work at the college. And I'm not talking about the people on the interview panel. Herb and I have gone to the extent of applying for a job and actually applying as a student and going through their process and meeting people and talking to people. And again, when you're applying, you have to ask yourself, how serious are you about getting whatever job it is you're applying to, and to what length are you going to go through? Now, with that said, I know that Herb and I are both mentoring people who are chasing titles. And what I mean by chasing titles is they're so adamant about being a dean or a vice president or a director that they'll go to a campus that is a horrible place to work and then get there and wonder why they're having trouble. Some of these decisions, folks, of not only seeking a mentor but applying for a job can be career ending. You can wind up at the wrong place. And you can see in our pathway, both Herb and I had to shake the spot. We had to leave a college because it wasn't going to work out. Now, fortunate enough, and I agree completely, Herb is one of the most likable people I've ever met in my life. If I come back in another life, I want to be like Herb. And so when you're likable and you're an expert at what you do, Herb is an expert at what he does. Expertise transcends race, right? Look at Michael Jordan, look at Kobe, look at whoever, and I'm using some athletic examples. As Black folks, we cannot be afraid to take on mentors who are not Black. Herb, do you have some mentors that are not Black?
Yes.
And we'll find that sometimes those folks help us out more because they help us navigate these systems and these structures, as Herb said, that we're not necessarily set up for us. And I'm not mad at you if you want a Black mentor, but I also tell you, and Herb knows this, my biggest critics at San Bernardino Valley College were Black folks. And so, that's another element of this for those of you who desire to be in an all Black environment. That comes with its own challenges and consequences. And so, Rico, the question in terms of how do you begin to search for a mentor, seek out some professional development programs that we're going to provide you. And I would ask Caesar or Amir to drop both Herb and my email in the chat. If you want to get a copy of this PowerPoint, or you want Herb or I to look at your resume or to meet with you, we make ourselves available. But let me say this: if you don't want to have a real conversation, don't contact us. Because if your resume needs some improvement, we're going to tell you. If your outlook needs some realignment, we're going to tell you. And so we make ourselves available. Let me check the questions real quick. Herb, you want to? Simon talked about some leadership books, and Simon, we got a page in the PowerPoint. We're going to drop some books on you. But Herb, do you want to, just for the sake of conversation, talk about some of the books that you have read that have helped you along the way?
Yes. At one of the campuses I worked at, the leadership was lacking from the president all the way down to the middle manager. So one of the things that the president offered was for us to all read Good to Great. And I know that's a little cliche, but Good to Great was a really good book because we just didn't read it and then put it to the side. We read it and applied it to the work that we were doing. I've also read Strengths in Leadership, and I'll put some of these in the authors. And then Ricky talked about the President's Roundtable that me and him both attended through the Lincoln Institute. They have a book called The Chocolate Truth. And that was a really good book because it was a book based off of college presidents, Black college presidents, talking about their experiences and their trajectory to college president. And we have a few on the last slide.
Yeah, and I would add before I forget that both Herb and I teach as well. For those of you in student services that intend to ascend to the vice presidency and certainly to the presidency, you got to get yourself in that classroom. You got to figure out a way to get yourself in the classroom. I having the doctorate, which probably is a question we can talk about as well, is necessary. You see, Herb is in the program. We're pushing him along to get that Dr. Herb English in front of his name. That you're going to, for particularly those who aspire to ascend to the vice presidency, to the presidency, is really become an expectation. In Herb's case, he could at least say he's in the program, and it's not going to be easy. The doctoral program is some low key hazing. It's going to kick your butt. It's a lot of reading, but it's necessary if it is something you want to do. We're going to provide some books toward the end. Why to work in a community college? You heard Herb and I worked at the 4-year University of California in various 4 years. I wanted to be around people who looked like me, frankly. The majority of Latinx and Black students start their college career in a community college. And so what better place to work with students who come from very similar backgrounds as a community college. You see the data here. I think we're going to go through some of these slides. The reason why these slides are here is because you must know your data. You must know what the role of a community college is in preparing the workforce. That was an area of growth for me. I didn't know a lot about workforce and nursing and firemen and police and welding and all the career side of community colleges. The majority of the apprenticeship programs that community colleges educate folks. So if you're in student services, you need to learn the instructional side. If you're in instruction, you need to learn the student services side. All of us need to know the facility side. And this is part of your preparation that you need to know. But I'm going to turn it over to Herb to talk about the different pathways in terms of instruction versus non-instruction.
And that's no problem. And I want to piggyback really quick on something Ricky said. Being able to teach just puts another, if you're a student services professional, being able to teach a student development course, a guidance course, a freshman seminar course, just getting in front to be able to be taught for a year or 2 years puts another level of expertise in your tool belt. So I can only stress to you that if some of you have a master's in education or are getting a master's in education or a master's in counseling, et cetera, being able to teach on your campus is paramount. And if you are a classified professional or a staff member, do the class after you get off work. If you have a set schedule from 8 to 5 and they won't allow you to teach during your regular hours, take a class after you get off of work. But anyway, which pathway? You can go academic or non-academic. Obviously, academic is teaching, being in the classroom, full-time tenure track faculty, part-time adjunct faculty. You have to have the minimum qualifications, or at most campuses, you can do an equivalency, meaning in your master's program or your undergraduate program, in some cases, you took courses in that discipline, and then a committee will review that if you don't meet the exact minimum qualification. So it usually requires a master's degree in the field of instruction or a specific vocational expertise, either computer drafting, construction, auto, or welding. And then you have the non-academic classified staff positions. These positions are positions in most cases that do not require a bachelor's and or master's degree. These are jobs that you can get with maybe a minimum amount of college units completed. Your short-term, temporary, hourly, maybe a grant program or maybe a project, and you get yourself on campus. Coordinators, or you may have classified management or confidential positions. Most of the time, confidential are either those that work for senior leadership, or those that work in human resources?
Yeah, so we know we have a number of advisors on the line who are investing so much time and energy into our students that we do this workshop to encourage you to continue your education, whether you only have a bachelor's degree, whether you only have a master's degree, whether you are in a doctoral program, for you to ascend into these positions, which frankly are a good life, folks. Let me say this. Um, I never in my life thought I would make six figures. You know, a lot of times in education, folks try to make it out to be like we don't make money. Um, Depending on where you are in the country, educators earn decent living. And not only that, you usually have one of the last careers remaining that have a pension. Let me put it in perspective. When I turned 54 years old and I'm in my early 40s, I'm going to be eligible to get 90% of my max income for the rest of my life. What does that mean? Assuming I don't find myself in a uncompromising situation where I make a mistake or I get run out of town, I should be able to retire at 52 to 54 years old with 90% of my max income. That's a pretty decent life. And then you may be saying, well, why go get a doctorate? Let's put it in perspective. My doctorate costs about $100,000 to use a round number. While I'm not a supporter of taking on debt, let's look at the investment that I made in myself. First of all, the federal government has a loan forgiveness program over 10 years for someone who works in public education, where a percentage of my loan is going to be forgiven. I think about 40,000 of the 100,000 is going to be forgiven after 10 years. But even if it wasn't, when I was in the doctorate program, I was a director. I ascended over about a 7-year period from a director to a dean to a vice president to a president. And actually, I think that took place over the course of about 12 years. So in 12 years, my salary tripled. So I went from making low six figures to making mid six figures. And none of that would have been possible if it was not for the doctorate. And so to put it in contrast, that $100,000 is going to generate about $6 million. That's better than the stock market, folks. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who goes to get a doctor is going to find themselves in a similar situation. But that does mean if you do the things that Herb and I are going to talk about today, you will be able to position yourself to get a return on your investment for the doctorate. Decaria says, oh no, Herb answered Decaria's question. I thought I saw another question that I wanted to get to. Let's see. Let me talk. Let me unpack Decaria's question because it's actually a very good one. And Herb alluded to this. Not all master programs are the same, folks. They're particularly in California and Texas and other states, there may be a discipline list. And we find a lot of Black folks and others getting these masters in educational administration, which for the most part does not allow you to teach at a community college unless your community college has an educational program. And so you do need to be careful about the discipline, particularly if you want to teach, that your master's is in. Normally, you're going to need to get a master's in a subject that allows you to teach in your given state or area of the country. So be very careful about the master's that you're signing up for. My master's is in educational administration. It doesn't allow me to teach at my community college. I have to get what's called an equivalency, which goes in front of a committee, and these folks get to decide who does or does not teach based on a disciplines list. So be very careful about the master's degree. Yes, and so Decaria is talking about the open source credential requirements for teaching. That's going to vary from state to state. It's important that you look at that, and it's important that you choose a master's degree that is subject based if you want to teach. Now, in my case, the only option of teaching is not the community college. I teach I like to say I teach teachers. So I teach master's level students, I teach doctoral level students, but the fact of the matter is I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have a doctorate. So Dakaria, don't, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. Don't exclusively look for teaching um, at the community college level. Does teaching experience at K through 12 count? Herb, what's the answer to that question?
No.
It depends. But I would agree with her that the answer probably is going to be no. It really depends on the subject you're teaching and how you're using that teaching. If you're applying to be a vice president or president of a community college or a college, you know, I would say that the teaching at the K through 12 is not going to work against you, but they're going to want to know what, have you taught college students? And I can tell you when I was going through the interview process to be a president, that question came up. The faculty run the college, folks. You may not like to hear that. The faculty run the college and they want to know that you align with their values and their experiences, which means teaching college students. Let's keep this going. The questions are great. Eddie, I have 2 years of law school experience. I decided to work with foster youth. I've considered finishing my JD, but I do not necessarily want to practice law, but rather continue in the educational system. Herb, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, Eddie, you definitely, Eddie, will be able to teach, obviously, in different law schools with your JD. And I'm only talking about California. You will be able to also teach in the community college in criminal justice or maybe a business law. But I'm gonna be honest with you, you're going to have to do probably in California an equivalency with your JD because in criminal, we don't have many disciplines that only focus on law. So for you, it would probably be political science or criminal justice, and you would more than likely have to do an equivalency. Some schools will allow the JD to meet the minimum qualification, but it varies from district to district. I would have to. It's one thing that I can send anybody that wants to be a future a faculty member in California. We have a document called Minimum Qualifications for Faculty, and you can see per each discipline what is required and what is allowed. But every district also has an equivalence form or an equivalence application. You fill that out with your application packet, and then an equivalence committee will review it and see if you meet the minimum qualification.
Yeah, and I would just add, Eddie, that there are many people in the community college system that have JDs. My vice president of students has a JD. We run into people who have JDs that did not want to practice law. It is applicable because Herb will tell you, and we will tell you that probably about 90% of our work is human resources, which is dealing with some aspects of employment law. And so that would serve you well, particularly if you want to go into human resources, particularly if you want to go into student services, dealing with student discipline. I could see someone being in student life, having a JD, and it's serving them well. There's a lot of opportunities. And this slide here really hits on what Herb was saying, and that is most of our organizations at best are complicated, complex, and the culture may be chaotic. None of them are simple. And what makes them one of these 4 areas is because of the people who make up the organization. And so this really kind of shifts into our conversation about organizational structure. And the one thing I urge you to research when you're looking at these positions is what is the culture of the organization. I speak openly about my first year of college, my first year being a vice president of a college, having it handed to me. I mean, I was getting eaten alive because I had not studied the culture. Once I mastered the culture, then I learned how to navigate the people, build relationships, and my career started to flourish. But if I had not taken a step back to read Executive Transitions in Student Services, and we're going to give you these books toward the end, I would have probably been career ending. And so every organization has a structure. Herb, you want to tackle in a culture, you want to tackle the preparing for the job?
Yes. So obviously, most of us use higher ed jobs or some form of educational search engine to look for jobs that we want, or jobs that we feel that we would like to do. One of the things, especially if you have mentors and as you're getting involved in these different organizations, you want to have your network not only in your state, maybe in another region. So if you're on the East Coast, you want to make sure that you've made some connections with folks in the Midwest, Texas area, or even California, because those folks can give you some hot, some backstory on some of your job searching. So obviously, you know, uh, uh, Ricky is really right about this. One of the things about Google is you can really find out a lot of backstory about an institution from Google. The story may not be true. It may not be correct, but it can. If you read between the lines, it'll tell you about the culture of the institution. So if faculty is upset, if the president got a raise, if the president is remodeling his presidential suite, those things, believe it or not, will hit the newspaper that someone on campus is not happy with, community member, et cetera. Before applying, in some cases, especially in California, if you live 60 miles away from your job, you may have to move because the traffic here is horrible. So are you willing to relocate may just be in the same state, or it may be like I said earlier, I had went from California to Maryland. I was willing to relocate. I was willing to stay in higher education, so I made that move. Where does this position? What is the position that you're going after? Where does it fit in your 5-year to 10-year goal? So if you're a director or a coordinator, in most cases, you want to be a dean. Will this job help me on that path? Or will this job make me more attractive as, when I apply for the next position? Well, does the job have things that can relate to a next job, or does it stretch of what I've done in the past? And what do I bring to the position? One of the things that you need to do is be able to say, do I see myself in this position, but what do I bring to it? So, keywords, guided pathways, equity and success, outreach and recruitment. What do I bring to the job? So, are you went further?
No, you go ahead. You good?
Oh, okay. I thought you went forward. I didn't hit the process. But anyway, really quickly, because I think this is really, read the minimum qualifications for a job and go with me on this. A lot of states are very strict on the minimum qualification, master's degree, 3 years supervisory experience, 2 years of instructional experience. They're very, very, and if you don't have that, you have to find a way. So if you didn't supervise for 3 years, but you oversaw student government and leadership, you need to word that and prepare your resume to where they'll give you credit for that, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's what your pre-screening is does this person, no matter what they are, do they at least have the minimum qualifications so we can give this group of applicants to the employment committee. If you don't have that, you don't even move to the employment committee. Okay, then it's job qualification match. They start looking at preferred qualifications and things of that nature and scoring your application package. Cover letter, do they have this? Do they have a doctorate? Do they have a master's, et cetera? And then in most cases, that 45 to 50 is whittled down to 12. Now think about that. So a lot of you are taking not getting an interview personal. 60 to 50, and they get it down to 12. 48 to 50 people don't get an interview, right? Because they're looking at, in some cases, preferred and giving those people extra points. And then you get to the interview and the hiring process, and then obviously you land the job. Go to the next one real quick.
Yeah, and if let me jump in real quick,
Okay.
Herb, because what Herb said is so important, and we probably need to unpack it a little bit, and that is framing. Some people have a problem with framing things and associating framing with lying. I was very fortunate. Straight out of college, one of my mentors, as I was applying to be the assistant director of admissions at UC Davis at 22 years old, which was not a position for a 22-year-old. One of my mentors early on told me, you go in there and say you could do everything. And if you get your job, it's your job to go figure out how to do those things. And that's not exactly lying. That's saying, you know what? And Herb did a great example of framing. Well, if you already tell yourself, oh, I've never supervised anyone, and you don't look at supervision from a broad standpoint, because if you're overseeing students, guess what you're doing? Supervising. And so it's a way to frame things matching the position description so that you're not lying. I want to be clear. I'm not saying lie. I'm saying that the way that you frame things will either help you or work against you. You want to talk about the preparation, Herb?
Oh, for sure. One of the things that you're going to have to do, and I know it's hard, but you're going to have to send your resume. This is why mentors are so good. And I hate to keep going back to that, but you've got to have your resume seen by different eyes, right? We all have colleagues at our campuses or either another campus in our district that we can count on to give us the honest truth. You're gonna have to have someone look at your resume, because resume may be the thing that is setting people off. And I'll just give you, for instance, I saw a resume one time where the person had their picture on the resume. And I was like, now this picture took off maybe a quarter of the page. And I was wondering why they did that. And it just, and forgive me, I'm just being honest. It just really just set me off. And I just put that resume to the side because I was like, bam, I see the person's face. I won't tell you gender, color, or anything, or race, ethnicity, anything like that. But your resume needs to be clear, clean, blocked correctly, all those things that we hear in Job Skills 101 in the Career Center. Your resume really needs to say that. And then your resume needs to tell a story of where you've been, right? You have to set yourself apart from what everybody else is doing. And I'm telling you right now, everybody else is going on Microsoft Word template and creating their resume. So you're going to have to figure out, how do I make my resume pop? That's not with colors. That's not with pictures. That's with a certain format where people can say, John went to a University of Maryland. They majored in this. John's most recent job is next. And his accomplishments and his job duties is listed that applies to the job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. References, right? Your references, I think this is self-explanatory. Your references need to be able to talk to what you've done and what you've accomplished at your present or past position.
Herb, real quick,
go ahead.
Dive into the difference between the resume and the cover letter. A lot of people have that question when we do this presentation. Talk to the participants about what your approach is to your resume compared to your cover letter.
Oh, okay. So for my resume, and this took some time, so I didn't do this overnight, but I started questioning myself of why I'm so qualified for this position and I'm not getting an interview, that arrogance again. But what I do is I give a description of where I've worked, right? Just a brief 2-3 liner. I work at a rural community college, or I work at a suburban community college serving this many students, blah, blah, blah. Then I go into my accomplishments since I've been at that institution. I've increased student success for African-American males in my first year experience program. I have instituted a food pantry on campus. So anyone that reads my resume knows right off the bat, because in most cases, I learned this. In most cases, your job title, people already know what you do, if that makes sense. Your accomplishments show them that you're doing a great job at that institution. So that's one thing that I've added to my resume, a description of where I've worked, big, small, mid-size, blah, 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 blah. My accomplishments at that institution. And then I give a brief, I don't have 20 bullets of job duties. I maybe have 5 to 7. But as we all know, some of those things can be lumped into one bullet instead of having 30 bullets, because my job title, people know what I do or what I did at that institution. So name, education, my past employment, a description of that institution, my accomplishments, and my job duty.
And the next question that people will get is, how many pages should my resume be?
That depends. That depends. Because trust me, think about this. If you're think about your time on an employment committee. And if you haven't been on an employment committee, you need to get on one for your campus as soon as possible. But anyway, think about this. If you got to look at 70 job applications, are you going to look at the full cover letter, the full resume, and the a digital application for 70 people? Think about that. The easiest thing to look at is cover letter and or resume, because it's getting right to the meat. The application is listing all this stuff that you don't care about. You want to know if this person is going to be the best candidate to interview. So it depends on how it should be. But I can tell you, some schools will say your cover letter shouldn't be more than 3 pages, and your resume, the system won't accept anything more than 5. Okay, so it all depends, but you want to get to the meat of those 3 things: name, education, and your employment history of how it pertains to why you'd be a good candidate for the position you're applying for.
Let's shift her to the dress piece.
Yeah, let's go right there. One of the things, think about this, folks. It's real easy for men. Men, your suit should be dark blue, gray, or black. Don't hate the messenger. I know you think you fly in your burgundy suit. I know you think you're flying in your forest green, but this is not you stepping out with the fellas or your lady or what have you. This is you going into a professional environment and what you need to have on that day. You need to be as conservative as possible when you go into an interview. Yes, we all want to have swag. Yes, we all want to look good, feel good, but you're going to look good and feel good. Dark blue, black, gray, white shirt, and a conservative tie. For the fellas, ladies, I'm going to be honest with you. I went to a presidential institute, and forgive me if this doesn't come out right. You have to sit in front of a woman that is a presidential consultant, and she looks you up and down and asks your cohort mates what's wrong with how they look. Now, I know that's hard to do, but those that are wearing things that are too tight, those that are wearing colors that are not appealing to their body shape or skin tone, that all came out in front of everyone. Fellas that want to wear the fresh socks with the different this or that, she chopped that up. And me and you both know in most cases, people won't see your socks, but she even went that specific. Big earrings, certain shades of lipstick, certain hairstyles. I'm sorry. They got that critiqued, and other women in the room that were our institute leads also weighed in on that, because they sit on interview committees as well. So you really want to be the best way to say it is you want to be conservative as possible. Now, don't get me wrong. If you have braids or dreads, I do not want you to cut your hair off. I do not want you to cut your hair off. But if you are a male with cornrows, you need to take those cornrows out. Dreads are a little different. You have to make them as conservative as possible. Cornrows have a, go ahead.
A lot of people, this is where we start to touch some emotions and feelings. A lot of people want to usually raise the question, and I don't see it in the chat yet, so I'm going to ask it. Well, how does this align with being my authentic self? How are the things we're saying align people with being our authentic self? You want to tackle that, or you want me to dive in on it?
Yeah, you can dive in on that one. That's your favorite.
Yeah. You know, the interview, folks, you got to get through it. You got to get through it, and people come into the interview with bias, unconscious bias. We learned, Herb and I went through the same program. I didn't even know this, that you can go to Nordstrom's and they have a fashion expert that will do a test on your skin tone to tell you what your power colors are. There are certain colors on certain skin tones, on certain body styles that actually work in your favor. Knowing that, why wouldn't you want to do that? There are certain hairstyles that cover your face. There are certain hairstyles that extenuate your face. And these are all techniques, folks, that you must learn in order to set yourself aside above folks who are not paying attention to this. At the end of the day, is the piece that Herb touched on, is that at least in the interview, you want to be conservative. Now, if you want to wear that lime green suit that you got for Easter once you get the job and pass probation, but we're trying to help you get in, and you don't do us any good, or our students who you're going to serve, if you don't get the job. So I'm like, Herb, I'm not going to say I'm not going to say cut your dreads or whatever. I'm not going to go that extreme. Now, I would suggest it if you really want the job, but I respect that hair means certain things to certain people. And it's really going to depend largely on the culture of the organization. But what we know is, for a fact, is that there are power colors. We know that there are certain things that are a distraction. And we know that these things can either work in your favor or they can work against you. The interview is not the time to break in a new suit or a new dress or those new stilettos or those new dress shoes. You have to be comfortable. And we've sat in too many interviews as a deciding folks, which is why we do this presentation, with people touching and prodding and using their keys. And here's the thing. This is where the mock interview with 2 or 3 people who are going to give you some honest critique will tell you what's going on, because when you're interviewing, you're looking that way and the committee's looking at you. Herb and I have actually subjected ourselves to being videotaped. If you want to take it to the next level, you'll have somebody videotape yourself answering questions so that you can actually get a bird's eye view of what you do. Do you do vocal pauses? Do you fidget? I went to a mock interview and I sat in a chair that rocked, and I wasn't expecting the chair to rock. And here I am rocking in the mock interview, so much so they stopped the mock interview and said, "What the heck are you doing?" And I was like, "I can't stop this chair from rocking." Do you go to the college the day before to find out where the place you're going to interview is located? Do you practice interviewing in a similar environment versus your home? Do you go to a hotel? Do you go to the college? To what extreme are you willing to go to present a very similar experience as you're going to have in the interview? These things are very, very important in terms of role playing and practice. We're at an hour. We knew we were up against doing this. Let me show you this real quick. And this is a resume. I want to tell this story real quick. I had a friend who paid $500 to have their resume done. This person was getting some amazing jobs, didn't even have a bachelor's degree. And I was like, you know what? I would never pay. Can you send me that $500 resume? And what I found out is that the person who developed the template was an expert at Microsoft Word. Most of us are not experts at Microsoft Word. The key to the resume, I would say, and you heard it from Herb, you want to have some degree of a summary of your skill set. You want to have a mixture of bullets and text. You absolutely want your degrees on the first page. Because some of us, as Herb said, are reviewing hundreds of these resumes. We may not go to the second or third page if we don't see the things on the first page that we want to see. You notice in this example of a resume, my first name is on the first page. It's also in the header of the other pages. These are just some tricks of the trade that we've learned over the year. I'm going to stop there, Herb. I don't know if there's any last thing you want to say, and maybe we can spend 15 or 20 minutes beyond the hour taking questions for those who are able to stay.
Yeah, for sure. Ricky touched on something, and I know we were crunched for time, but that data that he was referring to, maybe you don't have to be so broad, but I think the data he was showing was very, when they ask you questions about why is this important for the institution, being able to rattle off either local data or state data or national data shows that you are in tune with the field or the institutional structure that you're trying to get a job at. And what I mean by that is one of the slides said 85% of all essential workers are trained at the community college. So being able to spit off those things, everyone who is in that interview in most cases, if they don't care about the institution, they at least care about where they work. So if I'm a nursing faculty or a nursing administrator, I can give a damn about everything else. I care about my nursing. So if you could speak to nursing, or you could speak to student equity, or if you could speak to guided pathway, if you could speak to the awesome STEM program at the institution, people, when you hear those names in your interview, because everyone's going to introduce themselves in an interview, you want to make sure that you touch at least half those people with your answer. And I know that's not the most easiest thing to do on the fly, but if you got folks that work in disability services, they work in student life, they work in the English department, and they work in outreach and recruitment, you should be able to try to tie those answers into something they care about, because that's what they're going to remember when they deliberate. They can go on and on and on, but the person that touched me, I want to go with that person because they mentioned my program. And I don't want you to do it. I want you to try to do it organically. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. But if I have anybody that works in certain departments, I'm able to weave my answers based off where they work. Or if they talk about a difficult situation, if I know the history of the state and the budget and all that, I may be able to key on that when I answer one of my questions. And they're going to remember that when they go into deliberation.
Yes. Are there any questions that we can answer? I do want, here's our email addresses again. They're in the chat. I do want to provide a reminder that you will get an email from Amir with the links to the survey. Please answer the survey. For those of you who are advisors, please make sure that your students respond to the survey. It allows us to collect data. This is the largest repository of data for men of color and their advisors. The link for the survey is also in the chat, but we'll email that out, Amir, to all of the participants. There is an actual model for interviewing. It's called the SHARE technique. I would urge you all, it really is an analysis of what Herb and I just talked about: situation, task, action, results. If you can get to the point where you're using this model and you're doing exactly what Herb described, that you're using an example for the people who are in the room, you will master the interview because you'll be speaking to the area. And ultimately in the interview, what people want to know is, what is it like to work with Herb? What is it like to work with Ricky? And did he take the time to learn enough about my program that at least he can give me a little smidget that he understands my program and what I do in my respective area.
Really quick, and
Go
really
ahead.
quick, Ricky, Rico has an excellent question about how do you get through an interview with people you already know. This goes back to Rico about how you how you're doing at your job currently, first and foremost. So I know people that have applied for jobs at their campuses and they haven't gotten them, and they ask me why they didn't get it. And I ask them, what are you currently doing to show people that you like so they can see you in that position? So first and foremost, are you doing the extra? Are you getting on the extra committees? Are you volunteering for projects? Are you working after 5 o'clock? And I know that's loaded and it's quick, but then when you sit down in the interview and you know the people, you can talk about. So if they say, tell us about a difficult time, Rico, uh, about budget. If you have a person in the room that knows about your personal budget, you could say, well, hey, Marilyn, we had to deal with that budget crisis in 2008. That was really difficult. As you know, me and you spent several hours looking at how we could work more together and have our dollars be stretched more to serve more students instead of us double dipping students in each program. And I know that was quick, but you could key on certain things that people in the room know about and that you shined at. See, if you just do a bare minimum at your campus, the people in the room are never going to see you in that next position. And then you got to realize you're going to have some haters in the room anyway. So you got to speak to those choir members in the interview, because if those choir members can give you that vote and you can just get to that second, you've already won. The role of the first is try to get to the second.
That's right. And let me chime in. We had a question about the CV, and the CV is specifically used, I would say, at the vice president or higher, and for all teaching positions. And the difference between the CV and the resume is the CV is going to dive a little bit more into what classes you've actually taught, what presentations you've done at conferences and workshops. And so absolutely you should be using a CV over a resume if you're applying for vice president or higher, or if you're applying for a professor adjunct teaching position. Folks, we could talk about this, as you can see, for hours. We just gave you all a little smidget. Hopefully we gave you all the information that you needed to do better in your next interview to land that job. We are going into a very challenging economic time. At least the next 2 to 5 years are going to be very limited. I'll give you an example. During 2008, 2009, the recession, I was hiring one counseling position and I had 500 applicants. This conversation is really about what are you going to do to get yourself in a position to get that interview 1 out of 500. As Herb say, make it to the second round 1 out of 500. And then lastly, be the 1 out of 500 who gets the position. We're entering into some very troubling financial times, and it is going to be a must to go the extra length. And then lastly, Herb and I are in the position that we're in because we very rarely said no. We very rarely said that's not my job. I got some people who say no, and I got some people who say that's not my job, but who aspire to ascend. Those two things are polar opposites. The people who are the ones that are willing to take risks and take on things that are not in their area of expertise will then put themselves in a place where they are an expert. I was able to learn instruction because I took all the off-campus programs. It didn't have nothing to do with what I was doing as the director, but I learned instruction. Any other questions that you have? We'll take, here's what we'll do. The next 5 questions, young Amir will get your name, your email address, and your address, and we'll gift you a Minicolor t-shirt for the next 5 questions, and that'll end our presentation. Do we have any brave souls? There are still a number of you on the line. The next 5 questions, Herb and I would love to answer. We will gift you a Men of Color t-shirt. Rico's first one out of the gate. I feel that I'm running into a situation at the moment. I'm good at my position for some. Uh, Rico, sometimes you're going to have to leave. A prophet is not respected in his or her own land. Herb, have you had to leave?
Yes. Yes.
I've had to leave.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Rico, if you would email Amir, put the email address to the Men of Color. Rico, if you will email the Men of Color email address, your name, your address, your t-shirt size, we'll get you a t-shirt. Kevin, how does age play to advancement opportunities? That is a great question, Kevin. You want to tackle that question, Herb?
Yeah, Kevin, that is an excellent question. But I would say this, and I know Ricky's like me. Age can play a point, but when I'm looking at building my team, I'm looking at the best player, if that makes sense. Like, how many teams wouldn't take Jordan from the Wizards? That's still 25 points a game. He's not gonna give me 25 for 10 years. He's gonna give me 25 for 3. Right? So age does play a part. Let's be honest. But the skill set and what the person brings to the table, if I'm creating a team, I need all those parts. I'm not trying to get a whole bunch of LeBron rookie year. I need different parts to play on my team. And I hate to use a sports analogy, but that's just easiest for me. So age does play a part. I'm not gonna lie. But sometimes, think about this now. Sometimes you don't look your age. We have people that are 40 that look 29, and that hurts them sometimes as far as do they have enough work history, right? But then the flip side of it, do I really want to have this person? I want somebody for 5 to 10, and this person only gonna give me 2. So that will play a part, but sometimes it's about that best candidate, no matter age or gender or what have you, because the person that's building a team is going for stars. They're not going, but then sometimes don't think it's always age. It may be that the person hiring says, this person is green, but I think they'll fit my team best. So it's not about all the information that they know. It's a gut feeling or something that they said that I know they're going to give me 110. And 110% beats experience sometimes. So like I said, it depends.
Yeah, and let me jump in there if I could, Herb. Herb is spot on, right? Mastery. But sometimes as a hiring manager, you want to train somebody your way. So even if you have all of this experience, are you coachable? Are you teachable? And how do you relay that? And there's something that I call the it factor. And that is a level of energy that you exhibit in the interview, whether you got to fake it, whether you got to create it, or whether you have it naturally. You want to be the sixth man on the bench, using an athletic analogy also. And you want someone to say, I'm ready to go. I want to be a part of your organization. And ultimately, what you want to say, no matter how much or little experience you have, is how are you going to help her? How are you going to help her accomplish the million things that his president wants him to do? Those are things that transcend gender, age, culture, ethnicity. Those things will transcend those things. Any other questions for us? Simone, there are jobs that require maybe a 2-year experience, and at times you do not know where to go about that since there are no similar jobs. How do you go about that? I would say this: you got to do your research, and this is where framing comes in. Can you look at the job description and say, okay, they're asking me to be able to design a program? Well, I've been supervising students and I created an ambassador program. That's designing a program. So you, Simone, got to create connections for the committee, even when there may not be any. Like maybe you don't have any experience, maybe you don't work in that area, but if you can frame things the correct way and convince people that you actually do have the experience, you'll find yourself getting more interviews, getting more jobs, and ultimately getting the necessary experience to do what it is you want to do. Simone, if you'll email us to the email address that Amir provided, we'll get you a shirt. We'll need to know your size. They are unisex shirts. I apologize for that. We have time for one last question. Is there a brave soul that would like to ask Herb and I a question? If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, because there were some slides we did not go over, email us. We'll be glad to share the PowerPoint with you. Eddie, I really love where I am, but my wife is pushing for higher pay. I hear you. I got one of those too. Um, I have a wife too that I love dearly. Um, um, because we have a baby on the way. Man, I've been there, done that, Eddie. I'm doing well developing a program I'm in. I just also I want to know how much to learn to where it get to be. I already took a pay cut to be at a college. Am I being complacent? I can't really answer that for you, Eddie. Family has to come first, bro. Let me say that. The thing I know about Herb and myself, we've never chased money. We've never chased money. We are in the business of helping people, and we want to be at a college where we have the most impact. And I would take a pay cut for that, because there's no amount of money that you should take to go into a culture that's counterproductive, that does not support you as a Black person or person of color or as a woman or as an LGBTQIA or whatever your circumstances is. There is no amount of money that will give you peace of mind if you are somewhere where you are not respected, if you're not appreciated. Now, that's not to say that you should settle for less, but that is to say that I have people who are chasing money, and that normally comes at a cost. And normally it comes at a cost of a culture that's not supportive of who you are and your development. Your family must come first. Seek counseling, seek therapy. The money situation is real because these houses cost money, these cars cost money, saving for your children's education costs money. But at some point, you can't put a price on your peace of mind. Actually, you better put a price on your peace of mind. And that may not necessarily be more money. Eddie, I hope I helped you. I don't, Herb, if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I was answering a couple of the questions in the other Q&A. But Eddie, I can tell you this, brother, and I'm married as well. If your queen is motivating and encouraging and inspiring you to get a better position, she is seeing something in you from what you guys talk about, or you guys, when you talk to your wife about your day, she's seeing something in that communication that either you're not being appreciated, or from the experience or from interactions that you have with other people at your campus or other campuses. She's seeing you as a dean, director, VP, etc. And I would tell you, unless you start applying, she's going to ramp up the fire on that. Not because she wants to be mean or anything like that. She loves you, and she just sees you. She sees you as as her superhero. So she always gonna see you in a good light. But it doesn't. She's not gonna stop. You know what I mean? And I say that with all due respect. She's going to always push you to where she thinks you should be. So I would take her up on some of those opportunities, and I really would start looking at other things. But you have to assess your skills, and we talked about that. You have to look yourself in the mirror, and if you feel you're not ready, that needs to be part of the conversation. But I can guarantee you, her next question is, well, how do you get ready?
Oh,
I don't
so
even know your wife, but I know wife questions.
Let me dive into that also, because Herb and I and others face this, right? Herb, you heard Herb, and I've done the same thing. Like, we've taken jobs outside of the area where we live, where we had to fly home, drive home, or both. These positions put a strain on your family. So Eddie, while you're having this discussion with your wife, also ask her if she's ready for what it means to take a promotion, or to be out of the area, or to have your cell phone going off at 2 or 3 in the morning, or have you checking emails all day, or having you devote as much time to your job and chasing after these dollars as your family. So it's a gift and a curse. Somebody quoted Jay-Z earlier. It's a gift and a curse. And I can tell you that our positions are the center of a lot of discussions, whether it be us taking jobs out of town, whether it be once your job gives you a cell phone, you belong to them. So Eddie, prepare her for that piece of it too, because it's great that she's motivating you, but are you going to get that same support when you get that promotion out of town, or when your new director, dean, vice president, they hand you a cell phone and they start calling 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night? Those are going to be conversations that are going to ensue. I want to tackle the supervisor question.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Rico. And the thing I know about Herb and I is we are so supportive of the people who work on our teams. I have 3 vice presidents. I expect that all 3 of them are going to be presidents, or I would fail them. I have deans that I expect to be vice presidents. And so Herb and I are not cut from that cloth where we suppress people. Matter of fact, we encourage them to seek professional development and opportunities. And so I hear of people who don't have that support. And the first thing I say is, I wouldn't want to ever work in an environment like that, but I understand that some exist. You got to have a heart to heart with them. You got to sit down with your supervisor and share with them your career goals, realizing that unfortunately, the best part of our job is the people, and sometimes the worst part of our job is the people. And sometimes we will have supervisors. I know they exist because I hear about them, and we get this question every time we do the presentation, that there are some supervisors who don't want to see you go. There are some supervisors who don't see you the same way you see yourself. Those are very real things that you have to navigate. And the best advice is to sit down with them and map out what your career goals are. I think that's important because they either going to support it or they're not. And if you find out that they're not, then you gotta chart a different course to seek mentors outside of that person, to seek support outside of that person. I have a young lady right now that I'm mentoring who's in this situation. And it's because some people are intimidated by you. You're going to run into a supervisor or a dean or a president who's going to be intimidated by you because you're a shooting star. That doesn't mean stop being that shooting star. That means be strategic about how you interact with that person. Herb, I don't know if you want to add to that discussion.
No, you hit it. And I think Rico is a great question. But one of the things that I would suggest is not volunteer, because sometimes volunteer can be a word that you're not getting anything out of it, right? Even though I know what folks mean. I would sign up if they have any task force or working groups or committees on campus. That's where people see you shine, and it'd be people from across the campus, faculty, administrators, sometimes the president. So try to sign up for different committees and different task force or different projects, or whatever, graduation committee. Sign up for those things and just make sure you get your supervisor's approval, because sometimes supervisors that are not supportive will not like you to sign up for anything that takes you away from your 8 to 5 work, even though it is part of the collegiate process of you serving on these committees. So just make sure that you do that. And even if it means doing something after 5, like a new student welcome or something like that, I would volunteer for those things.
And there's also a technique that I'll share real quick, and this is probably going to have to be it. We appreciate you all staying over. We should have made this workshop 2 hours. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. Sorry about that, folks. I had a president when I was a vice president who was not a good public speaker. And I knew that. I knew that those were the rules of engagement that the person didn't like when I outshined them because I was a better speaker. And so I had to go to my team and say, look, when Dr. So-and-so is speaking, I don't want to speak. I want to introduce them, but I don't ever want to even be perceived as trying to outdo the president. You should never want to be perceived as trying to outdo your supervisor. So I learned a technique that every time I spoke and the president wasn't there, I would start every one of my speeches by saying, I'm here on behalf of Dr. So-and-so. And I did that because I knew that would get back to Dr. So-and-so. And over time, we built a relationship where Dr. So-and-so was not intimidated by the fact that I was a better speaker. And so sometimes we may be doing things unconsciously to add fuel to the fire if we have a supervisor who we know is intimidated by us. So you got to be strategic. You got to have the open dialogue, because at the end of the day, no matter if it's right or not right, that person is going to be a reference for you. And you got to figure out a way to win them over. And one of the things is the technique that I showed in or discussed. And the second thing is to just sit down with them and say, hey, how can I get your support? Is there anything I can do to get your support with doing X, Y, and Z? Now, I realize that sometimes the answer may be no, but at least you know. I'd rather know somebody's a hater than to not know that they're a hater. With that said, Herb, do you want to end with the last words?
Hey, I know it was quick. I hope everyone got a little nugget today. Obviously, like Ricky said, most times we do this 2 to 4 hours, and we really get down. Obviously, we get through the PowerPoint, and then we sit around and answer questions. Obviously, 30 to 45 minutes after we finish. But a couple of the nuggets that I would just take away from this is start with the easy stuff: cover letter, resume, have someone else look at it, and someone you admire or someone at your campus that you think would give you an objective uh, uh, evaluation of it. And really just start looking at, I know this is cliche, really start writing down where you want to be in the next 2 to 5 or 3 to 5. So if you're a director or classified or a faculty member, wherever you want to be, if it's full-time faculty, really start writing these things down. And then for each thing that you want, how are you going to get there? You don't have to share with me or Ricky, but you really want to really start analyzing, how am I going to get there in the next 3 to 5? And I guarantee it's going to have to be working with someone on your campus or working with someone in your network, or joining a professional development organization or doing some form of leadership training, and then take those tidbits. And I know a lot of you are in different states, et cetera. Start looking at those different organizations within your institution or your region or nationwide, because I'm telling you, they are valuable. They are valuable to get those networks and that professional development opportunity.
And I'll just conclude with saying thank you to everyone for sticking around. We could go another half hour, 45 minutes. I want to be respectful to everyone's schedule. We are here to help. Herb and I do this because someone did it for us. So if we could review your resume, if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint, if you just like someone to bounce something off of, shoot us an email. We'd love to be able to help. And again, we have an obligation to help, because we would not be where we are if others didn't mentor us, if others didn't help us with our resume, if others didn't help us with a mock interview. And so we have an obligation to help others. It's been great. Thank you all very much. Email us if we can be of any assistance. Herb, it's always a pleasure to present with you, brother.
Yes.
Caesar, Amir, thank you all for the backup support. Amir, let's get an email out to the participants with the links to the surveys. Those of you who are advisors, please fill out the survey for Cal State Fullerton. For those of you who are students, fill out the survey. And for anyone who needs any help reviewing a resume, helping you make some decisions, the answer is going to be it depends, but we love to be able to walk you through that. Be well, be safe. God bless. We'll see you next time.
Have a good day. Be safe.